In the early 1700s, the Indian subcontinent was the undisputed heavy hitter of the global economy. By producing massive quantities of high-quality textiles, spices, and agricultural goods, India controlled roughly a third of global GDP. It was wealthy beyond the wildest imaginations of European monarchs. Yet, a British startup corporation, known as the East India Company, crossed an ocean and managed to swallow this economic titan completely whole. They systematically dismantled the wealthiest region on Earth and turned it into a corporate asset. Now, look just slightly to the east. You find Japan, an isolated, relatively small island nation positioned right next door to the lucrative ports of China and India. Western colonizers sailed right past it for centuries. The British Empire did not skip Japan out of respect. They operated as a ruthless multinational corporation, and they ran a strict cost-benefit analysis on every piece of land they encountered. We tend to view imperial history through the lens of military glory or cultural destiny. The reality is far colder. National survival in the 18th and 19th centuries was dictated by a mathematical return on investment. Japan survived because the math said they should. Look at this corporate balance sheet comparing the two regions. On the left, India presents a massive surplus of high-yield assets. The East India Company could extract endless shipments of cotton, silk, pepper, and indigo. It was a perfect, highly liquid investment. On the right side of the ledger, Japan offered an entirely barren economic reality. It was a chain of volcanic rock with severely limited arable land. They had no massive cash crops, and any surface-level gold or silver reserves had already been depleted by earlier traders. To make the math worse, the cost of extracting whatever meager resources Japan did possess was astronomical. The islands were populated by millions of heavily armored, highly disciplined professional killers known as the samurai. In India, the British avoided expensive land wars by exploiting internal divisions. They used the vast wealth they extracted to bribe local, fractured regional kings into fighting each other. The East India Company simply bought the subcontinent from the inside out. Committing the British military to a protracted land war against millions of samurai for a rocky island would have bankrupted the invading corporation. Japan was spared because conquering them was a terrible business decision. Japan saw the British corporate bribery playbook tearing through Asia, and they engineered a strict macroeconomic firewall to prevent it. They implemented a policy called Sakoku, or the closed country. For 250 years, the Tokugawa Shogunate maintained a perfectly sealed loop. Foreigners were banned from entering, and Japanese citizens were banned from leaving. The penalty for violating this border control was immediate death. To ensure local lords couldn't be bought off by outside forces, the shogun required every regional leader to maintain a residence in the capital city of Edo. The shogun essentially held the lords' families hostage, enforcing absolute, unshakable loyalty to the central government. Compare that tightly sealed vault to India's fractured network of competing kings. The British divide-and-conquer strategy required internal cracks to exploit. You cannot bribe a local lord to betray his country when the supreme military dictator already has his wife and children locked in a fortress. By locking the borders and holding its own leadership mathematically accountable, the Tokugawa Shogunate eliminated the exact internal vulnerabilities that richer, larger nations fell victim to. A defensive moat works flawlessly until the enemy invents a bridge. By 1853, the technological gap between the isolated island and the industrializing West became impossible to ignore. The United States dispatched Commodore Matthew Perry to Tokyo Bay. His orders were straightforward: park a fleet of heavily armed warships in the harbor and force the borders open for American trade. Japan was staring down a terrifying mechanical reality. They were fielding an army equipped with swords and early matchlock muskets. Sitting in their harbor were massive, iron-hulled steamships, mechanical monsters that were entirely capable of firing explosive cannons miles inland. The Japanese leadership looked at the geopolitical map. China, the ancient superpower of the region, had recently been humiliated and carved into pieces by the British during the Opium Wars. India was entirely subjugated. The math of their survival had flipped overnight. The 250-year-old isolation strategy that kept them safe was now a guaranteed death sentence. Instead of fighting a doomed war against explosive artillery, Japan executed the fastest, most aggressive internal corporate restructuring in human history. They restored the emperor to power and launched the Meiji Restoration, actively outcapitalizing the Western threat. They liquidated their own ancient warrior class. The government banned the samurai from wearing swords and stripped their hereditary stipends. In their place, Japan built a heavily armed conscripted military strictly modeled on Western armies. They imported the very enemy that threatened them. Japan paid massive financial premiums to bring in British railway engineers, French legal scholars, and Prussian military advisors, reverse engineering Western infrastructure to build their own. By rapidly adopting factories, banking systems, and heavy industry, they generated immense domestic wealth. Before Western empires realized the strategic value of the island, Japan had already armed itself with the exact same industrial playbook. You either adapt to the new balance sheet, or you become a line item on someone else's. Japan survived the era of empires because they were willing to completely burn down their own ancient traditions to avoid becoming a colony.